All right, my friend. Richard, stay in touch. Hey, by the way, if you're like most people, you reach for a sugar substitute because you've been told it's good for you, right? And that it should save you from the evils of sugar and that it would even help you trim off those extra pounds. But I don't think that's so. According to the Douglas Report, aspartame is one of the most dangerous substances ever added to food. Not only has aspartame been proven to make you fatter, it's been proven to cause some pretty serious diseases, not the least of which are cancer and neurological diseases as well. Well, up next, Dr. Betty Martini joins us as we talk about aspartame, diabetes, and other side effects next on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back to Coast. I'm George Norrie. Dr. Betty Martini spent 22 years in the medical field, founder of the Missouri Possible International, an organization that educates the public on the dangers of aspartame. Dr. Martini works with world experts and has operations in most states and over 30 countries. It's Mission Possible International. Here she is back on Coast to Coast. Hey, Betty, how are you?
Oh, I'm just great, George. I'm so glad to be back with you, and there is so much news on aspartame.
Oh, this stuff is unbelievable. Now, what's the latest about it in diabetes?
Well, there's an article out that says diabetes may affect as many as 1 in 3 Americans by 2050. Well, I'm surprised that it says by 2050 because you got half the country and lots of the world using this stuff. And you know, Dr. H.J. Roberts is a diabetic specialist that wrote the medical text, and he's always said that aspartame can precipitate diabetes. But not only that, it simulates and aggravates diabetic retinopathy and neuropathy. It destroys the optic nerve. It causes diabetics to go into convulsions. It interacts with insulin. And the free methyl alcohol causes diabetics to lose their limbs. So a lot of times they'll say, well, they're diabetics, they're going blind. But you got this free methyl alcohol that's converting to formaldehyde and formic acid in the retina of the eye. And it causes optic neuritis, macular degeneration, and total blindness. One of the reasons we work so hard to warn people is that Dr. Morgan Rayford, who owned the Atlanta Eye Hospital here in Atlanta, and he was an ophthalmologist, but he was the specialist in methanol toxicity, and I inherited his records. And he says if, you warn people in time and it's vision's still in the wet stage, you can get your vision back. And we've gotten so many people who were legally blind gotten their vision back because we were able to get them in time. So when diabetics are using aspartame, the doctors have no idea they're using free methyl alcohol, and they're not going blind from diabetes. They're going blind from aspartame. And so it has caused this diabetic epidemic, and the doctors agree. And in 2004, somebody filed racketeering charges against the American Diabetes Association because, these professional organizations...
Well, they endorse aspartame, don't
they?
Yeah.
They take money from the industry, and they push it on them. And even though they got out of it, they turned right around and continue to do that. And many times we walk with diabetics at these walkathons, and they're wearing equal shirts. And it's very interesting. I know one time they called the police. They saw us come in with long stem yellow roses, and it was because somebody had died from aspartame. And the press got them along with sympathy cards and black lace, getting the idea out. And finally, the police said, well, they're just trying to warn these diabetics. This is public land. Let them do it. And so by the time that it was over and we'd given out all this material, we started getting calls back from diabetics, that their problems had completely disappeared and their blood sugar was normal. And just to see what is causing. In fact, one of the cases that I remember the most was in my own family, when someone came to Atlanta on the way to Florida and said, I've just stopped in a minute. William Reed's dying. He's not expected to live out the day. And I said, well, wait a minute. Why is he dying? Well, he's having 6 or 8 seizures a day.
Oh, my gosh.
All kinds of problems. I said, what is he, a diabetic using lots of aspartame, going blind, MS symptoms? She said, well, yes. And I said, well, call him and tell him he doesn't have to die. And it was almost kind of humorous because she gets on the phone and she said, William, Betty says you don't have to die after all. But as it turned out, she came back about 3 days later and she stood in the door and she says, you know, his seizure stopped. And if I hadn't stopped in Atlanta, she says, he'd be dead. And I said, yes, and they're dying all over the world. Well, this is an interesting case because my husband once lived in Michigan, and he went back a few weeks ago, and he went to see William Reed. This is 15 years later, and he's just fine, and he's driving again, and his vision has returned.
That is incredible. So yes. Why hasn't there been, at least I don't know of, a class action suit against the manufacturers of this stuff?
Well, the attorneys tell me this. It's like a third world war. He says that you have to have the millions of dollars of tobacco attorneys. And there was this courageous attorney in Oklahoma that took six cases. And as soon as that happened, they sent in their big guns. He says, I have to dismiss them because if I don't, they can never be set back up if they dismiss them. And they're powerful. And, they always manage to get something done because in 1986, the Community Nutrition Institute and James Turner attorney petitioned the FDA to ban aspartame because so many people were having the seizures and going blind. And they took this all the way to the Supreme Court. And this was way before my time, so I said, well, what happened? And the person that was around said it was a corrupt judge. They just get to everybody.
That is unbelievable.
And, just to show you, this is almost borders on the twilight zone, but Dr. Monte, who was in Arizona, tried to get a hearing because, it breaks down at 86 degrees, and you know how hot it gets in Arizona, and you have formaldehyde cocktails sitting outside 7-Elevens. And first, they turned it down, and the lobbyist came, and he finally got a hearing. They actually took a bill on toxic waste that had already passed and took the guts of the bill out and wrote up something to prevent the regulation of artificial sweeteners and squelched the hearing from ever happening.
As bad as sugar is, and I don't use it, aspartame is worse, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. And, I'm glad you brought that up because you may think, well, I'll just go to take something else. We won't use aspartame. And incidentally, people need to know they changed the name to amino sweet. It has other names.
That's a good point, Betty, because now when they start reading ingredients, they may not see aspartame. They'll see that, right?
Right. And they had it in artificial and natural flavors, and you got Equal, NutraSweet, Spoonful, E951, Canderel, Benevia. But let's just say you go to Splenda. That's another very poisonous product that's basically chlorine if you like to drink bleach. But there is a particular warning to diabetics because researchers found that diabetic patients using sucralose showed a statistically significant increase in glycosylated hemoglobin, which is a marker that's used to assess glycemic control in diabetic patients. And according to the FDA, increases in this imply a lessening of control of diabetes. So, and then asulfame potassium, there you've got another one that caused cancer and leukemia in original studies. And if you keep on going around with all these products that they put out, they are, they've got additives in it and chemicals. They've got Truvia now, but they put erythritol in it, and we're getting all these complaints.
Well, I know you're a proponent of chicory, right, instead of sugar.
Right, and I was just going to bring that up. Thank God for just like sugar because, Dr. Blaylock, the neurosurgeon, insisted that we analyze it, and it's food. There is absolutely no chemicals in it. Chicory's been used for 70 years to improve the health of diabetics.
It's an herb, right?
Right, and then you've got orange peel, and you've got calcium and vitamin C from organic oranges, and there is nothing else in it. And now they're making gum because, that's the worst aspartame product because it works like nitroglycerin under the tongue, goes through saliva straight to the brain, and they're putting aspartame in all the gums.
Oh.
So now, just like sugar people are making gum. They called me the other day, and they've been making cookies and vegan cookies and gluten-free cookies, and they taste incredible.
Why isn't everyone off this stuff, Betty?
Well,
why don't they just stop taking aspartame?
Well, the reason is, like one lady said, she says that she had taken cocaine in high school, but that aspartame was more addictive. You have to remember that the free methyl alcohol is classified as narcotic.
Is it addictive, do you think?
Oh, yes, it causes, Dr. Roberts explains it very well. He says it causes chronic methanol poisoning.
Jeez.
And this affects the dopamine system of the brain and causes the addiction.
Okay, well, now, when you talk about addiction, though, it's not like people say, I got to have my aspartame. They say, I want my diet soda or whatever, don't they?
They are highly, highly addicted. In fact, one day...
But, I mean, they don't know what they're addicted to. They don't know they're addicted to aspartame.
Many times, you're right. Many times they will think that they're... Oh, it must be the caffeine. They have no idea. And that's because of all this propaganda from the manufacturer. We got a little bit of methanol in there, and, there's more methanol in oranges. And what they do is they don't tell you that, that in oranges that it's bound to pectin, takes it out of your body, and that it's got ethanol in there, which is the antidote for methanol toxicity. They tell you all these things, and like a scientist told me in the UK, he says they talk about a small amount of methanol, and he says, but in molecular chemistry, you got 1 molecule of aspartic acid to 1 molecule of methanol to 1 molecule of phenylalanine, and we laugh at them.
Well, Betty, when we come back in just a moment, I want you to tell us the story of how aspartame was discovered. It's a unbelievable story, and we'll take phone calls with you, and perhaps you might want to share your story with us, folks, if you drank some of this, what it did to you. We'll be back in a moment on Coast to Coast AM. Well, next hour, Michael Drosnin joins us as we talk about Bible Code 3, Saving the World. Incredible stuff coming up on Coast to Coast AM. And when we come right back, we'll take your phone calls with Dr. Betty Martini as we talk about the dangers of aspartame. That's all next on Coast to Coast AM. And welcome back. We're with Dr. Betty Martini. Betty, what about stevia? You recommend that?
Yes. Stevia is okay if it's the green leaf stevia and they haven't put chemicals in it, because it's just like Truvia and Pruvia. When you mix a bunch of chemicals with it, in Brazil they add aspartame to stevia. So you got to be careful and make sure that it's pure green stevia, but that's okay. And incidentally, George, there is some world-breaking news I want to quickly tell you about,
sure,
because I think that the people would want to listen. And that is that if you remember the Ramazzini studies, there were 2 of them. One showed aspartame to be a multi-potential carcinogen, and one showed how that if a pregnant woman, if the baby survived, that because it causes birth defects, that, the person could grow up to have cancer. And now they have done another one, and this is incredible because it shows that aspartame causes liver and lung cancer. But the reason why this is so important is that the FDA knew about it back in 1975. Marian Burris of the Washington Post had written an article. Searle agreed not to put it on the market at the time because they had liver polyps and liver damage, and James Turner has said, and what about liver cancer? And the interesting thing about it is, these studies are peer-reviewed by 7 world experts, and you think if everybody drinking diet drinks and whatnot with this cancer-causing product in it, and it's not been on in any of the TV stations, the newspapers, it's almost just absolutely wiped out. And, I can't imagine these government agencies like EFSA or the FDA trying to rebut now a third one, especially when it was known. But I think people should know about that. And the other thing is that the other day when I was on a radio program, Dr. Deagle said something that is startling, and I asked him to write it out because I think people should hear it. I'm so concerned about the babies. And this is what he said. He said the European Environmental Association has projected that with the rise of autism caused by toxic foods like aspartame, MSG, fluoride, and environmental degradation, by 2013, that's 2 years away, no one will be born in the Western world that does not, to some degree, have autism.
Jeez. Aspartame discovered in 1965 by a chemist working at Searle, as we all know, and he accidentally discovered its sweet taste when he licked his finger after trying to develop some anti-ulcer drug, right?
Right, and incidentally, I've taken this long history. It sounds like something out of the Twilight Zone, and put it on the aspartame resource guide that has movies and detox and books and anything anybody wants that they can email me for at bdm19@manspring.com. But I will tell you very quickly that it is absolutely incredible. Because first the FDA tried to indict them for fraud because they couldn't take this poisonous product and get it to show safety. And then when the defense team hired both U.S. prosecutors, then the statute of limitations expired. So the FDA revoked the petition for approval. And on our website, mpwhi.com, you can actually read the FDA's 50-page report on why they revoked the petition for approval. And then, as soon as that was done, Searle filed suit to stop FDA Commissioner Jerry Goyen from signing this into law. And Rumsfeld was CEO of Searle, and Reagan owed him a favor because he was supposed to nominate him for vice president. Instead, he got Bush. So he owed him a favor, and he was on his transition team. And the day that Reagan
took office,
yes, what he did is he had the transition team call Dr. Jerry Goyen at 3 in the morning. And the reason that I know this is I talked to his wife who was there, and fire him. And then he wrote an executive order making the FDA powerless to do anything about aspartame until he could get Arthur Hull Hayes there as FDA commissioner to overrule that board of inquiry.
Yeah, he was the deciding vote, wasn't he?
Right. He was the commissioner, so he simply overruled it, and he knew it would take 30 days to get him there. And then everything changed at the FDA. There was a Philadelphia newspaper that talked about the new FDA when Hayes got there, and drugs that they wouldn't have immediately approved that were dangerous were approved. So everything happened at that time, and it was an immediate thing as soon as it got on the market. And actually, they were marketing it before then anyway. And the reason I know that is the man lives across the street, built the factory down there.
Well, they've made a lot with it, Betty. We've got a few minutes to go. We'll take some calls here west of the Rockies. Bradley, truck driving in San Antonio, Texas. Hi, Bradley.
Hi, George. How you doing?
Good.
Good. Yeah, I just kind of wanted to comment about, I heard this gal on your show last time, and ever since I was listening to the show, I've stopped using all the products. I used Sweet and Low for years, and then went over to Splenda, and what was it was doing to me is I had such a temper, and it made my temper even worse. And ever since I stopped using that, I've actually almost lost the verge of losing my cool, and I'm much more mellow about everything in life, and it's actually changed my life, and I'm glad I've been listening to your show.
Great.
Well, actually, if you were using aspartame, there's a whole good reason for it. It's the phenylalanine that depletes serotonin, causing psychiatric and behavioral problems and interacting with all antidepressants. And it causes suicidal tendencies, manic depression, paranoia, insomnia, all those things.
What do you mean by that? That's what it does. But that's how people act. I'm concerned about children who are taking this stuff, drinking all kinds of soda.
Well, actually, there was a doctor down in the Dominican Republic, Dr. Barrett, that called me that changed 360 children's diet from milk to aspartame juice, and he got concerned because when he called me, he said, look, it's been 10%, 20%, 30%, but when almost all of them immediately reacted, became hyperactive, and had behavioral problems and became confused and were losing their memory. And I said, well, for goodness sakes, doctor, get them off of it right away. And he called me a few days later and said they all reverted back to normal. So they normally wouldn't do a study on small children on this poison, but they did it by accident, and that shows you what it does.
Next up, we go to Wade in Ripon, California on the wild card line. Go ahead, Wade.
Hi there.
Hi.
How are you this evening?
We are well, thanks.
So am I. Thank you. My mother had diabetes, and she was taking or drinking aspartame soda, and I was wondering if that would make it worse.
Oh, absolutely. You missed part of it, but what it does is it actually precipitates diabetes, and it simulates and aggravates diabetic retinopathy and neuropathy. It causes diabetics to go into convulsions. It destroys the optic nerve and the free methyl alcohol that converts to formaldehyde. It causes the interaction with insulin, and the free methyl alcohol causes them to lose their limbs. And that's why we have a diabetic epidemic right now, is because of aspartame. It's killing diabetics.
All right, there you go. Thanks. We'll go to Cindy now in New York, New York. Go ahead, Cindy. Thanks for calling.
Hi, yeah, thank you two, for presenting this again. I have a friend who consumes aspartame and recently had a cataract surgery, and it didn't turn out the way the doctor had hoped, and he just keeps saying, gee, I don't know, this isn't healing right, and her vision is worse than it was, and no one's I don't know if this sort of inability for surgery in the eye to heal would be related to her aspartame consumption, the fact that it's not healing properly. And I was wondering what comments you have about that, possibly.
Well, if you will email me, I put all the eye reports on one sheet of paper, and you can click them on and print them out and give them to the doctor, and then he will understand what he's dealing with. It's also in the medical text, aspartame disease and ignored epidemic. So I know that for instance, the reason diabetics lose their limbs is that when they've got this free methyl alcohol, they cannot heal. And like in the case of Lane Shore's wife, Mission Impossible Chicago, a doctor said, oops, I found out about aspartame, get off of it, we can save your foot. She says, I'm too addicted, chop it off, and he did. Now she's lost her legs because she can't heal. But as far as the eyes are concerned, there's an entire chapter on it. It does cause many eye problems, and, I don't know what aspartame's done to the rest of her body, and the doctor probably needs the medical text, which is on our aspartame resource guide. But if you just email me and say, send me all the information on the eye, I'll send it to you, and the doctor will understand.
Okay, Betty, thanks for that. Let's go next to Randy, truck driving in Iowa, east of the Rockies. Hi, Randy.
Hey, how's it going?
Okay.
Well, I got a question. I got a father-in-law laying in a well-known hospital in Minnesota here. He's probably not going to make it. Today we talking 2 days. His liver has been affected all this time. It's been going on for about 4 or 5 months. He's about 74, retired farmer. But the clinic or the hospital he's at, nobody has a definite answer. They're just kind of fishing about what could have caused all this. He's just gone downhill like just in the last 4 or 5 weeks. He's just, it just keeps getting worse and worse, and nobody has an answer. Is this substance you're talking? Is this a diabetic substitute for sugar, or how does it work? Or are we all getting it?
It's a killer for diabetics, but it is pushed on diabetics, and it causes the liver enzymes many times to be very high. And a recent study showed liver cancer And if the doctor doesn't know, you ought to email me for the resource guide, and the doctors need to get the medical texts, one from Dr. Roberts, one from Russell Blaylock, the neurosurgeon. Roberts is a diabetic, and it will have everything in it, and they will understand. They're lied to by the professional organizations. I call them ladies of the evening. And then you've got the front groups, the FDA, and doctors have no idea that they're not dealing with an additive. They're dealing with an addictive, excitoneuratoxic, carcinogenic, genetically engineered drug that interacts with the mitochondria and interacts with all the drugs that they're using. So, and vaccines, and it's an adjuvant, like squalene, and causes the same things, MS, lupus, autism, ALS, all these different things. So there is so much information today. The doctors, the world experts have written all these reports we have on the website that goes just about everything, and the medical texts go into it, so that it's worth it to get one and take it to the doctor and say, look, this is what he's using, and they can go chapter to chapter on every disease or every symptom. It'll give you the mechanism by which it causes it and what to do and how it's done.
Have they banned aspartame in any of the European countries, Betty?
Romania. And that was because of the cancer in the early 90s. And we've been trying to get it banned, as you know, in the UK, and we tried in New Mexico twice. We tried in Hawaii twice. And, you're dealing with all these lobbyists and half-paid attorneys that come in there in the front groups and lie. And when I addressed the Senate in New Mexico, most of them were sitting there drinking a Diet Coke, and they were addicted to it. And Dr. Stoller addressed them as well, and he said, look, I don't think we're going to get very far. And he says, but have mercy on the children. So, they're given many times free to the government, and these people get addicted, and it is very difficult.
A lot of people, Betty, just don't understand the dangers of this stuff.
Oh, I know. And, after I argued with the doctor and gave him all the evidence in Australia, staying up all night with him, I made a comment to Dr. Deagle. I said, it's as if nothing matters. He says, well, Betty, it affects the frontal lobes first. It's like talking to somebody who's had a lobotomy. And that's exactly what it is. They do not care. They are so highly addicted to it. And in one case, this neurologist, Dr. Sanchez here, they got them off of it because they go through withdrawal from the addiction, had to put them in a mental hospital. But
jeez,
after a couple of days, the seizures had stopped and all the problems had disappeared. And there's even a place called Essence that actually takes aspartame addiction up in North Carolina. So, and they're aspartame detox centers. But it's a very serious thing. That's why we have an aspartame information list, so we can help people as they get off of it.
Okay, let's go to Carol in Arlington, Virginia on the wildcard line. Carol, go ahead. Welcome to the program.
Hi.
Hi.
I wanted to ask, there's a small beverage company called Zevia that makes different sodas that have stevia, but it also has the erythritol in it.
Mm-hmm.
They make their own erythritol. It's not some cheap chemical extraction process that are used by the bigger beverage companies. But I was wondering if that's a safe substitute if you do like an occasional cola.
Well, it's the erythritol, according to Arthur Evangelista, who's a former FDA investigator that's in the movie Sweet Misery of Poison World. He left the FDA because of corruption. And he said that mixture with the stevia is what's causing everybody to have all these problems. And I'm telling you, I'm just covered up with complaints. Now, they may be getting their erythritol from somebody else, but there's no way of knowing if it's going to have the same effect. And the only way that we know is the complaints coming in. And on Truvia, you can go to Google and put in Truvia complaints and read what the people are experiencing.
Betty, give us your websites and what's new.
www.mpwhi.com. And I would like to make one other comment. A lot of people know about Diane Fleming. Her husband was an athlete, and he was said to have methanol poisoning, and so they convicted his wife and put her in prison for 30 and 20 years, even though she'd taken 3 lie detector tests. And if anybody would like to help, there is a way they can help now if they'll email me, because this is very, very important.
Yeah, you're convinced aspartame did the guy in, right?
Well, we had 5 or 6 doctors look at the autopsy and said that's aspartame. And then a toxicologist came along, and he said, well, it looks like, because there was 3 times the amount of creatine that he mixed in just before he died, that the creatine actually did it. Well, the creatine interacts with the aspartame, and the man was on 9 drugs, and he was playing basketball 4 times a day.
It's an amazing story, and he became very, very ill. Thanks, Betty. We'll be back in a moment with Michael Drosnin as he joins us as we talk about Bible Code 3 on Coast to Coast AM.